It's time for the Volquest podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week.
Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast presented by our friends at Smoky Mountain Organics. Check them out online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com, or you can visit them at one of their 4 locations in Knoxville and East Tennessee, Kingston Pike, across from Trader Joe's. They got it in Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Sevierville. That is Smoky Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store. Be sure and check them out. And again, if you shop in the store, be sure to mention Volquest, and you'll get 15% off your total purchase price. But you can also shop online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com. With Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us on this Tuesday. Plenty to get to in the Volquest.com podcast. And Rob, we put a bow tie as best we can on this Ole Miss game and everything surrounding that game. What is your – let's start with the game itself. What is your takeaway from that, from Tennessee's loss? And we'll go there first. What's your takeaway from Tennessee in that loss?
I mean, I'm not calling it a moral victory. I know fans are tired of even hearing that kind of talk. But I think for a team that was as shorthanded as Tennessee was, I was really impressed with the way they competed. I mean, to me, that's my biggest takeaway actually through 7 games is how they compete and how they clearly enjoy playing for this coaching staff, and they're laying it all out there for them. But I mean, to be down 2 starting offensive linemen, to be down your best running back on offense, I mean, this team, it doesn't have the resources to overcome that. It just doesn't. And I thought the way they kept clawing back, and I mean, I think me and you talked about this, but even, I mean, you give up over 500 yards of offense. I thought the defense played pretty good in the second half. I mean, 4 times, if you count the very last desperation drive, they gave the offense the ball in the second half with a chance to take the lead, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, you hold that team to 7 points and 5 first downs in the second half. I think you're doing something. And I mean, Austin, you mentioned this in the 2-minute drill after the game, and I know you've mentioned it some since then.
The dumbest football play I've ever seen.
No, not that. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm on the more positive train right now. AP, jump back on the tracks here. Hop on the positive train with me. What I was going to say is and you mentioned this, and I want to echo it. Through this portion of the season, I don't want to say the MVP, but maybe you in the conversation for the MVP for this team is Tim Banks. What they're getting done on defense and how far they've come from where they were at the end of the spring with no identity, not a lot of parts, and what they're getting out of that group right now, and what he is evolving the mentality and the personality of that defense into, to me, in a lot of ways, that's as exciting as what Josh Heupel's doing on offense. I know it's not sexy because it's not 60 points a game, but you got to be impressed with what Tim Banks has gotten done and what he got done in the second half against Ole Miss Saturday night to give the team a chance to win.
Well, again, when your coordinator comes in, you never know. I mean, there have been a couple here that you thought were slam dunk, going to be a huge addition to the program, and they were duds. And then there's been a couple. I mean, look at John Jancic. He came in with not, I mean, people are like, oh, he was at Georgia, blah, blah, blah. And he was really solid. And then here comes Tim Banks. Didn't call the plays at Penn State, was co-defense coordinator, but didn't call the defense. Last called the defense with Illinois, and he had nothing in Champaign from a talent standpoint. So he was the great X factor coming in. You didn't know what you had, good, bad, or indifferent. You didn't know what you had, and to this point, and he's been dynamite. To piggyback Rob's comments, I am going to call it a moral victory, and Vol fans should gravitate towards it. Don't say you're tired of hearing moral victories. You got your tail handed to you, and the last 3 years in major games. This was a major game with a major atmosphere against a ranked opponent. You had, you didn't have. We're not even talking bullets in the gun hub. They had to flip that thing around and try to beat them with the butt of it. They had nothing. You look at the guys on both sides of the ball that were playing for Tennessee, and if you had told me a year ago that this was going to happen, I would have lost a ton of money. I think everybody would have. So, I'm all in on the moral victories right now, but not a year from now. But right now, with this group, with the lack of depth, I mean, to compete, as Rob talked about, the way they've competed through the first, 7 football games, and again, nobody expects much of them this week at Alabama. Everybody expects Alabama to be all mad because they lost 2 weeks ago at Texas A&M and play, unbelievable football. And maybe they do. Maybe they run Tennessee out of the stadium. But this team's going to go in there and they're going to compete, they're going to fight, and they're going to do what they do. And I mean, I'm all in on that. I think that's what you got to hang your hat on, is being competitive and finding ways when you don't have a whole lot. And right now, this group, this staff, this team, they're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, the effort that they're playing with is pretty crazy. Rob, Tim Banks reminds me a little bit of Justin Wilcox. Wilcox had more of a resume, I guess, coming in. He was the play caller at Boise and had the reputation because they upset Oregon and his game plan was there. But nobody really in the SEC footprint had any idea kind of who he was. And he was you quickly found out he was pretty good at what he was doing. I kind of the past of the arrival of Tim Banks kind of mirrors that a little bit to me. I mean, those are the two unknown hires when you think about coordinator hires that Tennessee has recently made. I'm not saying Sal Sinceri was, I mean, obviously that was a terrible hire, but everybody knew who that guy was, right? He had the Bama pedigree, terrible hire, but you at least knew what the resume looked like. You didn't with Justin Wilcox. Everybody said, who is he? And with Tim Banks, everybody said, who is he?
Yeah, and a guy, and similar, neither one of them had, really any connection to the South. I mean,
right.
Totally. I mean, coming from out west, coming from up north, I can see that. And they're both, I mean, personalities are a little bit similar too. I mean, they're not these rah-rah, they're not going to headbutt guys coming off the field. I guess Justin might have had a little bit of that in him, but they're more, business, take care of business type guys. And I think they're also like a lot of guys, like Coach Heupel and a lot of guys on his staff. They don't worry about what they don't have. They take the approach, I think, of not complaining, not wishing we had this guy or that guy. Just this is what we've got. Now let's build a plan and make it work.
And they've made it work. We'll see how much more they can make it work down the stretch. Obviously, at some point, this team's got to get healthy. We'll dive into the health of this team and kind of things moving forward in just a second. But let's put a little bit of a final bow tie on the Ole Miss thing. We cannot not do a podcast and talk about what happened at the end. The fact the SEC, to no surprise to me, has fined Tennessee $250,000. And all of that. That still no clarification or no real addressing of the officiating issues and the officiating question marks. How big of that? Maybe not publicly, because each individual fan base is going to be mad every week over officiating. But if you're Greg Sankey and you sit back from 30,000 feet and you're reviewing your football season to this point and look at it moving forward, how big is your concern over kind of what your officiatings look like across the board through 7 games?
I mean, I think that it should be concerning when you're the flagship conference of college football and it's not even remotely close. I mean, I think you should be having first-class operations across the board. And I mean, and to have a license to print money and not have enough cameras to have angles that you need for replay to get things right, to me, that's ludicrous.
Yeah, that's my biggest takeaway. And maybe I'm missing something here. I mean, I think they completely botched the Tyler Barron in that play. I mean, I think that's a botch for sure. Human error is always going to be an element in football. I think when you got 2 teams playing as fast as those 2 teams were playing, you better have your most athletic officiating crew on the field for as much as they were going up and down the field. But with the game going at that pace, you're going to miss some things. My biggest thing, and this is for college football in general, but certainly the SEC because I'll follow it closer, Austin, is that your replay is not good enough to fix enough wrongs. You're going to have wrongs on the field, and not every play, not every penalty can be reviewed, and I get some of that. But some of the fundamental things are not getting corrected in review. And that's the head scratcher to me, whether it's either the review people doesn't make a lot of sense or you don't have the technology to give you enough angles to fix mistakes with review.
I agree of everything you just said. I mean, to me, like all of it, the amount of money that's involved in the television contract, every television game should have the same amount of cameras, whether that's streaming on SEC Plus or CBS or ESPN or SEC Network. You know, it boggles my mind. We are in a day and time where we can follow a golf ball for 300 yards with tracer. Why can something not be put in a football where the ball is at all times, you know, compared to the line to gain? I mean, I'm just saying, like things like that could be invented. Like, I mean, like, you know, we can follow a golf ball and the curvature of it perfectly for 300 yards, but we can't follow, you know, a football for 10. I just feel like that some type of technology can be invented to help, and to me that helps the officials. It's a backup for them.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that review was put in place, Rob, to right wrongs, but because wrongs are always going to exist. There's a human element to it. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to miss things. There's no question about that. But I mean, one of the biggest fundamental issues in football right now is marking the football, spotting the football. And somehow, some way, whether it's a chip in a football or somebody mentioned this on the board, I think it's actually a pretty good idea. You know, put a camera on the yard marker at the end of the end of the yard marker where the first down line is. You got a yard marker on each side of the ball, put one there and see if that helps you see the ball. It's just mind-boggling that the three angles that they showed, they did not have an angle where you could see the football because there was no angle on the other side, no camera on the other side of the field.
And I'm obviously no scientist, but I mean, the things that they're doing with nanotechnology these days, I have to believe you could put, you know, sensors on a football,
right,
and
triangulate
it.
Yeah,
be small enough to be small enough to put in the nose, or, you know, it wouldn't affect the flight or anything. I mean, they're making things, I mean, tiny these days. I mean, like that to me, it seems fixable, especially for a league that, like I say, is just absolutely printing money right now. Like you should want to fix it. You should want to make sure that you get everything right that is humanly possible to get right.
Yeah, I think finding a fix to that's more important than creating a pylon cam. You know, I mean, what's the pylon cam giving you other than, you know, a director, a nice shot at some point? But I mean, you don't need the pylon cam to determine a touchdown. But you know, I think that's the direction that this thing has to go moving forward. Not right now. The other thing they have to fix is, you know, the flops. You know, the guys taking a dive, and I don't know. I hear the argument that the guys got to stay out the whole series, or the guys got to stay out 5 plays. I don't know how you keep track of that. I think that's hard to monitor in some ways and keep track of. I also think in some cases that's not really fair. I mean, guy gets the wind knocked out of him. Should he have to set for 7 or 8 snaps?
You know, like Alontae Taylor when he got hit in the nuts. I mean, like, you know, it is what it is. I mean, like, should he have had to set out for 5 or 6 plays?
Yeah. You know, so the question becomes then, should you be allowed to substitute during those timeouts other than the player that's injured? Is that some way? But I mean, Greg Sankey was on The Nation. I think he's pretty clear in saying they've got to fix this problem. I think a lot of people are seeing, you know, when you got coaches visibly caught on camera saying, lay down, get down, you know, when guys are, you know, it's pretty clear that guys aren't hurt, and they take 2 or 3 steps and then fall down, or stand there looking fine and all of a sudden fall over. It has to be fixed, doesn't it? I mean, this can't continue because it's only going to get worse if they allow it to continue.
I mean, it's making a mockery of things. I mean, it's absolutely.
They'll find loopholes. Like, let's say they say you've got to set out X amount of plays, or they'll find a loophole with, you know, they'll start, you know, or that when they get a player in there that's just a pedestrian guy that they can afford to play without, he'll become the designated laydown guy. It just won't be as frequent. You know, it's like Josh and them love to, you know, have the fake injuries on extra points, which, you know, doesn't slow down play from a like on the field. It just slows down in between the touchdown and the kickoff. So you're just killing time, not like play time.
I don't know what the answer is, but it can't continue to go the way that it's going because it's only getting worse. And again, it's just creating a substitution. And I think one of the biggest concerns has to be the fact that teams are obviously doing it to substitute 4 or 5 players instead of just one player. So the easy answer might just be you can't substitute anybody else. Whoever gets hurt has to come off the field, and you bring one person in. That would slow it down, right? I mean, and maybe that's the easier thing to manage as opposed to saying, all right, this guy's got to set out X number of plays or whatever the case may be.
Because they're using it to change personnel.
Absolutely, that's the whole reason they're using it. So, I mean, if a guy takes, think about it this: if a guy takes a fall on 3rd down, so that you can get your pass rush package on the field. You get a stop, then they punt. He's not missing any time because he'd be coming off the field anyway, right? So where's the win there? I mean, teams are going to do it on 3rd down all the time, so you can get a stop and make that substitution. So they've got to prevent the mass substitution on it. I think that's the biggest issue because that's where everybody's taking advantage of it at this point. All right, let's talk about this team heading into this week. They've been competitive against everybody. They played gritty against everybody. Rob, they got enough in the tank to play like that one more time before they head into an open date?
Not if Hendon Hooker doesn't play, in my opinion. I think with him, I think they'll put some points up. Without him, I think it's going to be a real struggle. And man, I think we've all been on board that he's been playing really, really well. Monday night, started compiling the Pro Football Focus stuff. Hooker's graded out the 10th best quarterback in the country right now, according to Pro Football Focus. And unless you think, I know some people look at those grades and scoff. Other guys in the top 10 are Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, C.J. Stroud from Oklahoma, and Bryce Young. So that's some pretty heady company. And so if he's not around, I don't think it's close. I mean, it may not be close anyway. I don't know if Vegas expects him to sit, but with Hooker, I wouldn't think Tennessee's a 28 underdog like the line opened up as.
Austin, I think you and I agree, Rob probably does as well, that, setting him makes the most sense. Get well, and Rob, I know you agree with that too, but you take the open date, get well. With Joe Milton, with the way that game ended, with the way he did at the end, if you're Josh Heupel, do you have any concerns about your team playing at the level in terms of the effort and the intensity that they played at with Joe Milton on the field versus, obviously there's a drop-off in production with Hendon Hooker. My question is this team, would their effort or will their effort be the same if it's Joe Milton at the quarterback, in particular with the way that the game ended?
Yeah, I think that there were some that were very frustrated with Joe after the game, with the way it ended, more so than just the fans. I just look at it as this, like at the quarterback spot. To me, I would never want to play Joe the way the game ended. I would play Harrison Bailey, but I understand if Harrison doesn't want to play and he's content on redshirting. I know he can play 4 games, but if he plays this game, then that's just one less he can play in the rest of the year. If you needed him later in the year to kind of get to the finish line if Hendon, were to re-aggravate something. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do Saturday. Heupel doesn't feel this way. I don't think. I think if he can get anything out of anybody, he's going to play him. But I'm all on board with Cooper, Tyon, all those guys that have been nursing ankles. Cade, set them, that gets them 2 full, really 3 weeks from now, when or 19 days before they play Kentucky.
Rob, this team, and we all know this because we talked to enough guys, and it wasn't window dressing. This team was all in with Joe Milton in the preseason, right? Heading into week 1, heading into week 2, they were good. Even though Joe didn't play great the first week, they were all good. This team played hard the first 2 weeks. Their effort was good. Does anything change, or does this just the DNA of this team is established? They're going to show up and play.
That's what I think. I think I think it's the job of the coaching staff to get them ready to play. And I think they will do that no matter who's under center.
Yeah. So my guess is that's how kids respond. I think that frustration goes away pretty quickly. There's a lot of frustration at the end of that game for a lot of different reasons, but I think kids are pretty resilient and line up and play whoever the next opponent is in front of them and are going to lay it on the line. Bigger surprise to you guys. Well, let me just ask it this way. How big of a surprise has Omar Thomas's play to you guys? Upon rewatching, I thought he was exceptional Saturday night.
He graded out as Tennessee's highest player. Pro Football Focus graded him out as the highest defensive player, Hubbard. So you agree with him on that one. So yeah, he showed up way more than he has at any point in the season. I'll throw in Byron Young too. I thought he flashed. I mean, he's flashed a little bit in every game. I thought he flashed pretty consistently in this one. I mean, there were a couple of times where you could really see his athleticism.
What did you say about Amari? AP?
I was just going to say, I think maybe just starting to click for him more. I mean, he settling down. I mean, it's just second year in the program. First time with a real defensive line coach because he didn't have one a year ago. He had a substitute teacher. So I mean, I think just more than anything, just settling down and kind of finding himself. He's in better shape than when he arrived. He's learning from Rodney, doing some different things, using his hands more, being a little more violent. And, at least Saturday it showed up. We'll see. He's got to continue to be more consistent, but, definitely maybe his best game to date.
Do you guys think Matthew Butler's an NFL player?
I think he's got a shot, man. And speaking, I know we've talked about this before. He played 78 snaps.
Just ridiculous number. Stupid.
I don't know that I've ever seen. I mean, I know I've never seen a number that high for a defensive lineman. I think he's going to give himself a chance.
Here's the thing. Whoever knows who is an NFL player and who's not. I mean, there have been guys that you're like, oh, that guy is going to kill it in the league. And they were just never made it. And then guys, you're like, how is that kid still in the NFL after 8 or 9 years? So,
Kim Johnson.
Yeah. I mean, all it takes is one team. I mean, look at Nathan Peterman. It took one coach. Now he's no longer with them.
Nathan's career's done because that guy's out of the league, but go ahead.
But hey, how many years does he survive though? This is what, year 5? So, I mean, 5 years in the league, you get an NFL pension. I mean, no one would have ever thought that.
I just a good chunk of change, I'm sure.
Yeah, I just if I'm an NFL scout, there's a lot of things I look at. Matthew Butler, maybe he's a little stiff, maybe he's not this, but I keep coming back to the durability and the volume of snaps that he plays, and I'm just sitting there going, is there not a place for him on my roster somewhere? You know what I mean? I mean, is he ever going to be an all-star? I don't know about that. He's not nearly as athletic or productive as Dan Williams was, Rob, that senior year. But you just don't see guys playing, defensive tackles playing 55 to 80 snaps a football game. And he's consistently playing 50 plus every week.
I'll tell you what else will help him out too, is he's a high character guy. He's going to be a great locker room guy. You're never going to have to worry about him, his attitude, about him not showing up for work. I mean, from all those standpoints, I could see him being a professional. I mean, a guy that coaches just like to have around that they know they can depend on. I mean, I don't know that he'd ever be an NFL starter, but I think he's given himself a chance to be a rotation guy. He'll definitely be in somebody's camp next year. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Again, somebody's going to look at that number of snaps and take note of that and just, talk about you're looking for competitive character. You're trying to figure out what makes a guy tick. I mean, that's a guy who playing the game obviously means a lot for someone who's got the ability to do that. Speaking of volume of snaps, I asked Josh Heupel this on Monday. I'm going to ask you guys the same question. How concerning, I know there's an open date coming up, but how concerning is it with the number of reps guys are taking that they may hit a wall, may run out of gas, so to speak, down the stretch of the season?
I mean, surely he's dealt with that before. I mean, does he have a plan I would think that he's, come up with some theories on how to manage that, having, played at this pace his entire career as a coach.
Yeah, I mean, I would think. I mean, he said they would continue to go about it. Guys would recover and they're in good shape and they can handle things. I just wonder at some point in time when you got receivers playing 80 snaps a game and you got, the number of plays guys are playing, I just wonder if that catches up to you at some point. I think that the open date comes at a perfect time for Tennessee from a scheduling standpoint.
Javonte Payton played every single snap Saturday night. Played all 83 offensive snaps.
I mean, now
that's crazy.
I'll say this, Austin. They save some receivers' legs during the game because if the play's not going to your side, there's some plays where guys just stand there when the ball's snapped.
Yeah, I mean,
which is unusual.
Yeah, it's different. Just some things they teach. I mean, it's what makes them good in certain ways, but it makes some people go, why did they do that? Because it's just different. You don't see it a whole lot.
No, you certainly don't. All right, let's hop to a couple of recruiting things here before we get moving and get rabbit. Well, before we do that, Jimbo Fisher to LSU, is that too easy to see, or is everybody missing something there? No buyout in the contract. He can walk from A&M, which is the craziest thing I've ever seen in a contract that's being done. The guy who hired him at A&M's now at LSU. Fisher was at LSU once before. Is LSU a better job than A&M? Is this a lay down to fit for Fisher or no?
No,
I don't think it's a lay down, but I think it's a better job. I mean, you're the only school in a state that produces tons of talent every year. Texas A&M is never going to be the top program in their own state. I don't care if they're ranked number 1 in the country and are undefeated, and Texas is 3-6. Texas is still going to be the flagship program in that state.
So does that make the A&M job even less attractive because Texas is coming in the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it makes it maybe a little less attractive, but it's still a big time job. You guys were there when we all saw the resources that they have several years ago, and they've got tons of money. It's just, Texas is one of the all-time blue bloods, and even if their performance does not match their reputation at the current moment, I don't think that's going to change. Do you?
I think so. Can LSU afford $10 million a year?
After they paid Bebe 17 to go pick up chicks at gas stations.
I mean, they just pay the women's basketball coach $2 million a year.
I think any SEC school, not Vanderbilt or the Mississippis, but I think any of the power programs that are national championship contenders, you can come up with that money.
It feels awful easy, and maybe it is, but it feels like this is the roadmap that's been laid out there for a year. You know what I'm saying? That this is where it was going. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. All right, we got to get to the couple of recruiting things before we get out the door. Austin, in a nutshell, recap last weekend and kind of where things maybe are going defensively in recruiting for Tennessee, because I think that's kind of what's on everybody's minds, defense.
Well, no doubt. They're going to continue to swing at some of these kids like, that are pass rushers. James Pierce, Joshua Josephs. Wouldn't surprise me if Demario Tolan gave Tennessee another look now that LSU's back open. Not sure Tennessee will go down that road. Maybe, though. I don't think it's an open and shut case, just because I think Pierce and Josephs have rocketed up the board so much. Obviously Walter Nolan is someone that Tennessee covets. Tennessee wants to add corners. Everybody's going to ask about Christian Harrison. I had this in the chat. I put this in the chat because people asked about it. I don't think that anything's imminent there. I think, he's getting more and more interest. I think Tennessee right now is the school that stands out to him, but I think he's going to look at everybody that comes calling the next 6 weeks or so, and then probably start working towards a decision then.
Anybody else on that LSU commit list? Correct me if I'm wrong, did Emory Jones visit the offensive lineman?
He did, and that'd be the one guy.
Would they take a swing there? They need an offensive lineman, but a lot of I've thought maybe transfer, tackle, that type of thing. Would they swing at another high school kid?
Yes, they would swing at Emory Jones.
Just because they liked him that much?
Yes, very much so. Emory Jones, big time.
Yeah, I don't know that Emory Jones would have interest in Tennessee. I don't know where he's going to be at. But, when you make a coaching change this early, Rob Lewis, you're serving up your commitment list to everybody to come after, right?
The vultures are circling.
They are certainly big time circling as well. All right, so for Tennessee, Austin, you got a couple of weeks off. Night game, will they do any work in Alabama, you think, this week, seeing some kids? Or is that
I can see him going to see Squirrel White. I mean, if Cody Burns isn't in Birmingham seeing Squirrel White play, because I don't believe they've been to that school this fall. If he's not there, then I'd be shocked.
Okay. And then they will use the open date to head out everywhere for the weekend, right?
And, who knows with Squirrel White? Auburn ain't going to go away. Alabama loved him at camp. They had, somebody like Barryon Brown ahead of him. But he was ahead of a lot of other guys. A lot of smoke around Barryon in Kentucky. So, I think Barryon's, trending towards the Wildcats right now. And so if Alabama misses on him, then do they turn their attentions to Squirrel White or someone else? I mean, I'm just playing, the things that Tennessee's going to have to, think about.
Navigate through for sure. All right, Rob, let's quickly hit the hoops front. Big official visitor in this past weekend. That update on him. What's the latest going on? Hoops recruiting. What's the latest going on with this current roster?
Chandler Jackson in. Guy that Tennessee offered late, guard out of Memphis. Contrary to some, I don't really think the late offer hurt Tennessee because I think they were very upfront with him about it. They even when he didn't have an offer on the table, they were talking to him. They were in touch. They were, keeping him abreast of the situation. And I think having met him, he's a mature kid. He's a really intelligent kid. I think he appreciated the forthright manner in which Tennessee dealt with him instead of, throwing him an offer that was not committable at the time. And I think in a way it might have even helped Tennessee, but to deal with him up front like that. He visited Virginia Tech. I don't think they're in it. He's visiting Florida State next week. I do think they're in it. Memphis, he told me that Memphis, Florida State, Tennessee were the schools recruiting him the hardest. He didn't want to talk about favorites, but I would label those as his top three just based on his comments. And he's got some ties to Tennessee. His family, they're Tennessee fans. He's got some high school friends that are currently on campus. He and Kennedy Chandler know each other really well from growing up in Memphis, playing a lot of ball together. And I think that in a way that Kennedy Chandler picking Tennessee and leaving Memphis would make it easier for other people and certainly Jackson to do the same thing. So I would keep my eye on that one. I don't think it's a slam dunk by any means, but I think Tennessee's in the top three, and I think the kid is open to leaving Memphis, unlike you see with a lot of prospects from there.
Friends with Dallin Hayden.
Do what?
Friends with Dallin Hayden.
Yeah, friends with Dallin. That's a good point. As for the current roster, Rob, anything major happening there?
Nothing that we haven't been covering in the war room. I think Rick's got a pretty defined. The biggest storyline there is just who's going to end up not getting minutes, because I think there's enough depth on this team that you're going to see some really touted guys not have a defined role on this team.
Because Rick's not going 10 deep, right?
I don't see it. I don't think he'll change. He's never, a lot of years he doesn't go much past 7.
Right.
And maybe there'll be an 8th guy that gets some crumbs here and there, but I can't see 9 people. For instance, I can see 8, I guess, but I can't see 9 people really having a defined role and getting regular minutes on this team. But maybe he adapts, but that's really not his strong suit.
Yeah, so we'll see what this basketball team continues to look like. We'll continue to cover that. Obviously, you're going to cover Tennessee football all week leading up to the Alabama game. Who all plays? How does this thing shake out from an injury standpoint, and who's available as the week progresses? And how does this team continue to line up and play with the effort and intensity that they have as they head into a long stretch of games here, or finish out this long stretch of games before the open date comes up. So we'll follow all of that. We have stock report, all of our regular coverage coming up throughout the week at Volquest.com. That's going to do it for this edition of the podcast presented by Smoky Mountain Organics with Rob Lewis and Austin Price and Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest podcast every week here on Volquest.